amigos de 18 minutos, bienvenidos a un programa más. Soy Francisco Rodríguez Aguirre, presidente de Smart Speakers, y me encanta estar aquí con mi amigo Mauricio Reynoso.
Encantado de estar nuevamente en una edición más de nuestro programa 18 minutos, Pancho.
Con nuestros amigos también de Mundo Ejecutivo. Y pues bueno, hoy tenemos a una gran invitada. Ella es una gran conferencista, es la doctora Taryn Marie. Es exdirectora de Desarrollo de Liderazgo Ejecutivo y Talent Strategy en Nike. Es autora del bestseller del Wall Street Journal, Las 5 prácticas de las personas altamente resilientes. Taryn, it's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be with all of you.
Taryn, how do you define effective resilience in the business world?
It's a great question. And so many people ask me this question. Really, the definition that has emerged for me over the last 2 decades, having interviewed hundreds of people and collected thousands of pieces of data on how we effectively face our greatest challenges. The definition of resilience is the ability to face the inevitable moments of challenge, change, and complexity, or the 3 C's as I call them, and to emerge from those moments enhanced by those experiences, not diminished. And I'll say just one more thing about that definition, which is that definition is powerful in its simplicity, and it's also notable for what's not part of the definition. No longer do we think of resilience as quickly recovering. In fact, the people that come back to the office or back to the sports field or back to their daily lives after having something significant happen oftentimes have complications or difficulties later on. So resilience is not about quickly recovering, and resilience is also not about bouncing back. So often we've talked in English and Spanish about resilience bouncing back, going back to a prior state. And in fact, true resilience allows us to be fundamentally and forever changed. And in that sense, I'm teaching that we don't bounce back, we actually bounce forward. We allow ourselves to be changed by our experiences, and that is true resilience.
Thank you.
And based on this, Taryn, recently I had the opportunity to read about anti-fragility by Nassim Taleb. How do you understand being anti-fragile, and if this has something to be related to the effective leadership or not?
That's such a great question, and I admire Nassim Taleb's work. I love the book Anti-Fragile. I think it's been an incredible contribution to the field. You know, I think where we intersect in terms of anti-fragility and resilience is the idea to shore up our resources so that when the moments, the 3 C moments of challenge, change, and complexity do emerge into our lives, that we have the resources, the skills, the knowledge, the abilities to be able to respond to those inevitable moments. You know, it's not if we're going to face difficulty in life or business, it's when. And what I love about this work is it's allowing ourselves to be less able to be taken off track by these inevitable moments of challenge, truly planning for them. And yet, on the other side, when I spoke with hundreds of people about how they faced their greatest challenges, the very first practice, and I know we're going to talk about these 5, the very first practice is the practice of vulnerability. And so many people think that vulnerability is the opposite of resilience. It's the opposite of being anti-fragile. And so what resilience does relative to the practice of vulnerability is we also allow those challenges to impact us, to change us, to form us and shape us on our trajectory in leadership and in life. So in summary, I would say I think Nassim Taleb and I are very aligned in terms of how we think about resilience and anti-fragility, and yet in my work on resilience, I also find that the ability to be vulnerable is a critical skill in leadership and in life because it ushers in an opportunity for us to have greater authenticity and greater compassion in those moments when we're facing difficulty.
Great.
Talking a bit about leadership, how do you relate resilience with leadership?
It's a great question. For me, they go hand in hand. I think for the two of you and anyone that's listening to this interview, no one ever said, wow, this leadership thing is so easy. Oh my gosh. Nobody told me how simple this all was going to be. I have so much time on my hands. I have no issues, right? Like that is not the trajectory of being a leader. So for me, resilience and leadership, it goes hand in hand because inevitably when we step forward to lead people, right? Now we can be a leader as an individual contributor. There's always people that are looking at us as a role model. When we step into a leadership role and have a role defined where we are truly leading other people, this is an opportunity to further hone our resilience. And these 5 practices provide a roadmap that allows us to grow and expand as leaders of ourselves, personal leadership, and also of leaders of others, and gives us the skills that we need to lead from a place of authenticity, of empathy, of compassion, and of presence. And these have always been critical skills for leaders, and yet it's more important now than ever as we think about the tremendous difficulty that people are engaging with, and also in our digital and hybrid work environments, the importance of being able to connect with people both in person and across digital platforms.
Okay, that's great. Related to that, Taryn, how do you see the teamwork effectiveness, organizational development around resilience, but most important in these times of turbulence, volatility, etc., where the people, the leaders, organizations are really challenged to work within agility and adaptability environments to really be effective?
It's a great question. So here's what I think we do in organizations. And you mentioned a bit about my background, heading up executive leadership development and talent strategy at Nike, global leadership development at Cigna. I've had the opportunity to consult for global national brands and organizations across the globe. And what I see that happens across all organizations is oftentimes we say, okay, we need help with change agility. And so we have someone, we come in and talk about that and we create a model. And then we say, we need our people to be more empathetic. Let's create a model for that. And, wouldn't it be great if people knew how to have personal leadership and to be accountable and to collaborate effectively with others? Okay, let's create a model for that and put people through a training, right? All of those things are important. But what ends up happening is like in our kitchen, when we open a drawer, right? And there's all these, silverware, mixing spoons, dishes, cup, things that don't match, right? All of these different models, basically, that we're handing people inside of organizations. Now, I think every single one of these models is effective in their own right. But what happens when we give people too many different models and assessments is people become fatigued around how they're going to make a decision and what framework and model they should use. So the thing that I love about the 5 practices of highly resilient people is this is a model that cuts across and provides guidance in leadership and in life in every moment when we face challenge, change, and complexity. And what it does is it allows us to have a framework that applies to every single situation. And that way we have a single set of silverware that matches, a single set of dishes that matches, a single set of cups, and it all goes together. And in any moment, we can connect with those 5 practices. And my research shows that when we demonstrate these 5 practices as individuals, as teams, as a culture, and broadly across the organization, we have the opportunity to create a more productive, and more positive outcome. So when people engage in the 5 practices of highly resilient people as individuals, teams, and organizations, we see a significant increase in engagement, in productivity, in innovation, and in sales. So that's not only a sort of qualitative, satisfaction, do people like this work, but across organizations, what these 5 practices do is drive real business results.
Great, Taryn. What, what does resilience, how does resilience helps to take better and difficult decisions?
Good. Decisions are really tough, and they're especially tough for leaders. One of the terms that I like to use for leaders is this idea or the experience of decision fatigue. What does that mean? It means that oftentimes our leaders at executive levels are tasked with constantly making decisions for our people. Anything from what color and size we want the font to be on the website, to what the sales proposal should look like, to how we're developing our strategy, to how we connect that strategy operationally to drive our outcomes. And so when we think about making decisions as leaders, one of the things that we can do is we can go to the 5 practices of highly resilient people. Now, I already talked about the first practice. The first practice is vulnerability. And that means that we allow our inside self, our thoughts, feelings, and experience to match the outside self that we share with the world as closely as possible as leaders. So the more our inside self, our thoughts, feelings, and experience can match what we're sharing externally as a leader and in life, the more vulnerable we are being in a moment as a leader. And I can give an example of that in a little while. But your question is about decision-making. And decision-making is really powerful in the second practice. And this is the practice of productive perseverance. What does productive perseverance mean? Great question. Productive perseverance is the intelligent pursuit of a goal. It's about knowing when to maintain the mission, when to stay gritty, if you're familiar with the work of Angela Duckworth, and continue on your mission in the face of challenge, even though things are difficult. But also knowing when we get to pivot in a new direction, or when we get to change our area of focus in moments of diminishing returns. And so as we think about decision-making for leaders, productive perseverance, this second practice is really a beautiful way to guide that, because what it does is it allows us to intelligently pursue our goals. We have a framework and a checklist and a focus on how do we know if we stay in pursuit of something in the face of challenge and that we will ultimately prevail, versus how do we know when it's time to shift and pivot in a new direction.
Wow. Going back to this, and building on what you have already shared with us, Taryn, I wonder what would be your recommendation for those leaders that are really working on their own development, specifically in terms of self-awareness, because I consider that would be the first step for leaders or anyone to really develop and understand this type of concepts. What could be, in your experience, the 5, 3, whatever steps and key factors to raise and enhance self-awareness?
Yeah, I think you're so right. And in fact, I think a journey of leadership inside of an organization is a journey of self-awareness. We've all been through the 360 assessments that we do inside of organizations. And really what a 360 assessment is telling us is how accurate is our perception of our own leadership as compared to other people's perception of our leadership? And how does that compare to different constituents, to our direct reports, to our peers, to our manager, our boss, and so forth, right? And so this is really an exercise in self-awareness, in knowing ourselves deeply, and also having the opportunity to understand how we're being perceived by other people so that we can be maximally effective as a leader. And so I love that this conversation is really taking us through the 5 practices, because the third practice is the practice of connection. And so often when we think about connection, we think about external connection. We think about other people, other relationships, our community outside of ourselves. And that is an important part of this practice. And yet we can't skip over the connection to ourselves. That is the foundational element of the practice of connection. The practice of connection is about knowing ourselves deeply. It's about understanding our strengths and our weaknesses and our opportunities for growth. It's about being able to articulate our value and what is the value proposition that we bring to the table as a leader of people. It's about tapping into our intuition and our feelings and trusting our gut in those moments when it matters most. So I love the question about, this journey of self-discovery and how that's connected to resilience. And I would say, in particular, it is deeply connected to the third practice of connection. It's about connecting with ourselves, knowing ourselves, and connecting externally with our community and understanding our impact, our influence, and how other people are perceiving us. So you asked for like 3 to 5 steps. Like, how do you go about doing that? Well, if you haven't participated in a 360 assessment, and by the way, I am not a proponent of giving a 360 assessment without another skills or leadership based assessment, because I think what happens is when we take a 360, we read all the bad things that people say about us, we try to figure out who said it and why it isn't true, and ultimately it can become unproductive. And so what we get to do is also take a skills-based assessment and say, how do we, apply our strengths in these areas where we have opportunity for growth? And so I think what you can do, whether you've taken an assessment or not, is go to your people, find 3 to 5 people whose opinion you value and you think has a balanced perspective, and ask them if you can set up time to invite them to give you some feedback. And then the question is, what feedback do you have for me? It's not, do you have feedback for me? Because people will be like, nope, everything's good, but what feedback do you have for me? Can you give me 3 strengths and 3 areas of growth? Solicit people. You can write that down yourself. A lot of executive coaches will do this for you. I do this for a number of my clients when we interview people that they're interacting with. Then you get to take what those 3 to 5 people said, you bring it back, you look at what they said, you can aggregate what you heard, maybe there are patterns or trends or places where that overlaps. And then you get to create a development plan and say, okay, what are the 3 strengths that I want to capitalize on, that I really want to bring to the table and amplify where I shine? And what are my 3 areas of opportunity? Where are the places where I have to grow? And then what you get to do is you get to go back to those people that you interviewed or perhaps your team and share that development plan. Share, here are the 3 strengths that I'm in the process of growing, and here's how I would love your help. And here are the 3 areas of opportunity or growth that I've identified, and here's how I would like you to support me in my growth here. And that is tremendously powerful, because not only are you investing in your own development, and we can do this whether you have an assessment or an executive coach, you can do this on your own. We are also sending the message to our people that 1, development is important, and 2, we are vulnerable enough, transparent enough to share that we don't know everything, and that's okay, and to ask for other people's help in the context of our development.
Taryn, thank you so much. It's really great content, but we have gotten to our 18 minutes. I want to tell my friends, I'm going to say this in Spanish. Taryn Marie, la doctora, va a estar con nosotros en el evento del ERIAC el 21 de junio en Monterrey. Los invitamos a verla, quienes quieran conocer más de su contenido. Thank you so much, Taryn.
Thank you so much, Taryn. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here with you both. Thank you for your beautiful interview questions and your interest. I'm so happy to be connected with you.
Thank you. Very appreciated.